From the Pentagon on the Potomac, across from the Washington Monument, the Department of Defense directs the worldwide activities of our armed forces. Secretary of Defense Robert S. McNamara heads the Civilian Military High Command. He acts for the Commander-in-Chief, the President, and this is his report to you. And now, Secretary McNamara.
In the past year, after 3 years of intensive buildup, our armed forces have shown that we now have the capability to meet any communist challenge and to meet it on any level, whether that be nuclear, conventional, or local. The communists have demonstrated time and time again that they will push against weakness and that they will retreat in the face of superior strength. This is very clearly the foundation of their strategy. And therefore, the foundation of our military strategy must be to stay stronger than the communists. Today, we have a flexible fighting team ready to deal with any threat, whether it be large or small. We are superior to the communists in nuclear power, and we intend to stay that way. Freedom is indivisible, and we can best protect ours as partners in freedom for all.
In 1963, our nuclear weapons for strategic alert forces show an increase of 100% as the result of the 3-year buildup. The number of Army combat-ready divisions has increased 45%. The number of tactical fighter squadrons for ground force support has increased by 1/3. Our airlift capability has increased by 75%. General ship construction and conversion has increased 100%. There has been a 6-fold increase in counterinsurgency forces, the men who train our partners in freedom to fight communist guerrillas. Today we have nuclear superiority. As a result of a year's increase, the number of Atlas, Titan, Minuteman, and Polaris missiles will about equal the number of manned bombers available for strategic retaliation. We should have 1,700 missiles by 1966. Another demonstration of America's strength and flexibility in 1963 was Exercise Big Lift. By flying the men of an entire armored division, the 2nd Armored Division, to Europe, where their heavy equipment was waiting to roll into action, we dramatically proved our ability to rapidly reinforce our NATO allies and partners. Already on the ground were the tanks, the personnel carriers, all the 6,000-odd vehicles of an armored division. Advance parties readied the stockpiled equipment while their buddies were crossing on an aerial bridge between the United States and Germany. 3 basic routes and some 30 air bases were used in getting our troops and tactical aircraft to their immediate European destinations. All the C-135s flew a northern route, 5,600 miles in 10.5 hours on non-stop flights. Other MATS aircraft using the same route stopped at Harmond or Goose and then Prestwick, Scotland or Mildenhall, England for refueling. Their flight time varied from 20 to 30 hours. 9,500 troops were moved along the northern route in 141 missions. The southern route was a 6,000-mile hop with refueling stops at Bermuda and the Azores. Time spent was 20 to 32 hours a trip, and 5,800 troops were carried in 95 missions. The Mid-Atlantic was the aerial highway for TAC's 71 fighters and reconnaissance aircraft. Distance covered was 3,500 miles, time 6 to 7 hours. Despite their shorter route and greater speed, the TAC pilots faced several in-flight refuelings, and at least one of them had to be made at night. The last MATS transport touchdown was 10:05 p.m., October 24th at Simbach, Germany. The biggest military airlift in history had been accomplished 8 hours and 40 minutes ahead of the scheduled deadline. In addition to the time picked up during the airlift, the 2nd Armored Division saved considerably more time by their rapid marrying up with equipment. In fact, the division was operational just 86 hours and 30 minutes after the first airlift aircraft had left the States. The 2nd Armored Division now moved out, drove the aggressor paratroopers from the near side of the river, and began an assault river crossing. For this crossing, the Hell on Wheels Division used rafting, assault boats, float bridges, and swam armored personnel carriers. Early morning, November 3rd, the 2nd Armored attacked the main aggressor force penetration, forcing the aggressor back across the frontier. The Commander-in-Chief of U.S. Army Europe, General Paul L. Freeman, Jr., sums up the entire exercise.
Exercise Big Lift tested the concept of rapidly moving an entire division from its base in the U.S. to link up with its combat materiel pre-positioned overseas. Some 14,500 combat-ready troops of the 2nd Armored Division from Fort Hood, Texas, together with reinforcing elements from other stations, were moved to the heart of Europe. Within 64 hours after the first element had left Texas, the entire division had been landed here in Germany, and within another 24 hours, the division had completed the pickup and servicing of its tanks, artillery, personnel carriers, and other equipment, and was ready to participate in a realistic maneuver. Exercise Big Lift projected a new dimension in U.S. Army and Air Force responsiveness.
This is the year for completion of the reorganization of the 16 regular Army divisions, increasing their non-nuclear firepower and mobility. The Army has a vast array of battlefield weapons, some of which can also carry nuclear warheads. During the last year, the Marines, afloat and ashore, continued to develop their amphibious warfare effectiveness. At U.S. bases, as well as with the fleets, the Marines displayed their readiness for combat. In its arsenal, the Navy Marine Corps team includes surface-to-air missiles and air-to-air capacity to score bullseyes. Or lay eggs from the sky. In 1963, the carrier Enterprise operated as a key unit in our surface sea power. The Enterprise now is part of a Navy maintaining 15 attack carriers and 3,200 active naval aircraft. In 1964, the Navy will have 837 active ships. Under the sea, as well as on the surface, the Navy strengthened its power. This launching of 4 submarines on the same day in 1963 emphasized our growing strength, both in Polaris ballistic missile subs and attack-type nuclear submarines. 2 at a time, visible in the upper and lower portions of this film, slide down the ways in Connecticut. In addition to Polaris subs already on station, last year's budget included funds for 6 more Polaris submarines, raising the total to 41. As this unusual view inside a Polaris submarine shows, there is capacity for 16 missiles. Ashore, the Air Force partner of the Strategic Retaliatory Team doubled its Minuteman strength in the last year as 2 wings of 150 such missiles were activated. The Minuteman, known as the Strategic Air Command's Instant Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, has a speed of 15,000 miles an hour, and the improved Minuteman II, a range in excess of 5,500 nautical miles. It's been designed for high reliability, survival from nuclear surprise attack, and instant reaction time for launch. Strategic Air Command bombers are the manned flying partners of SAC, a small number on constant air alert and over 500 on quick reaction ground alert. With a mix of missiles and bombers, SAC presents a second strike force more formidable than anything the communists have. In 1963, we also completed our advanced ballistic missile warning net. Fylingdale Moor Station in England was placed in operation after 6 years' work. With its partner Sentinels in Alaska and Greenland, it can provide 15-minute notice of missile attack from across the Arctic. Also at home during the past year, Civil Defense continued as an active partner in providing better protection for the public against fallout. Civil Defense guided the nationwide effort by individual communities to stock public shelters with food, water containers, medical and sanitation supplies, and radiation detection equipment. The federal government continued to buy and distribute emergency supplies sufficient to sustain 50 million people in shelters for up to 2 weeks following an attack. In 1963, CONELRAD was replaced by EBS, the Emergency Broadcast System. There are no special frequencies. The public can now get civil defense instructions from the local radio station, with more than 1,300 participating nationwide. Tests on Army's Nike Zeus continued in the past year as a major program for developing Nike X, the next step in working out an anti-missile defense system. Initiated this past year was the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, MOL, shown in this artist's conception. The Air Force has been assigned to manage this project, which will permit man to function better as a test pilot and as a scientific experimenter in space. It will have 2 astronauts in a Gemini capsule atop a Titan 3C launching vehicle. Just below the capsule is the pressurized cylinder, the laboratory, into which they'll descend once the vehicle is in orbit. The Navy's Subrock anti-submarine missile is already operational. It's another step in keeping America first in the development of modern weapons to meet all threats which may appear on the horizon. On the international horizon, the danger signal is still red, with Communist China taking the spotlight in 1963 for creating crises and chaos wherever possible. Under the Viet Cong flag, communist guerrillas continue to make South Vietnam a trouble spot where shooting is the order of the day. On presidential orders, Secretary McNamara and General Taylor have visited the embattled land on fact-finding missions. With Ambassador Lodge and General Harkins, the Secretary and General Taylor are briefed on the situation for reports to the President. On this trip, Secretary McNamara inspected some of the captured communist Viet Cong weapons and saw examples of the various types of arms which the Viet Cong are using. South Vietnamese troops trained by U.S. military advisors go into action constantly against Viet Cong hit-and-run guerrilla forces. Republic of Vietnam Air Force search and support is vital in isolated areas to flush the concealed communist guerrillas from their hiding places. U.S. training specialists in counterinsurgency stay on the job to help South Vietnamese fight to maintain freedom. In the past year, counterinsurgency training increased so that we'll have more specialists in 1964 to help any free world ally or partner facing internal communist attack. In Korea, constant patrolling of the demilitarized zone is required because of communist-inspired incidents and ambush. Eternal vigilance is the watchword of these patrols. Here is an actual incident filmed in 1963 on the spot by Army combat cameramen. Discovery of a marker uprooted by communists to cause a so-called border violation. This typical confrontation in the field between North Korean Reds and Americans representing the UN command is a result of the discovery. At historic Panmunjom, periodic meetings at a higher level between Communist North Korean and UN command representatives are held. Although filmed in 1963, this is typical of all such conferences since the Korean armistice. Inside, at a table set exactly on the truce line, a UN spokesman outlines a UN protest. This is a behind-the-scenes study in contrasts during what participants call an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation with the communists. Across the world in 1963, NATO received from the President assurances of firm support. Secretary McNamara with Secretary of State Rusk attended this meeting in Paris as we maintained the closest cooperation with our free world partners. For the United States, Great Britain, and France, free access to West Berlin, the Isle of Freedom in a communist sea, is a matter of continuing concern. Red created crises between thaws in the Cold War require close watchfulness. Deputy Secretary of Defense Vance, who visited Berlin as Secretary of the Army in the last year, saw firsthand the conditions created by the infamous wall. In 1963, Secretary McNamara also visited our troops in the field in Germany. With Assistant Secretary Arthur Sylvester, the Secretary experienced a river crossing. Later, Secretary McNamara, as a guest of German Defense Minister von Hassel, visited a German Navy training ship and watched the naval cadets learning the fundamentals of life at sea, which have not changed since the age of sail. Defense Minister von Hassel presented his son to the Secretary, typical of the German youth who are now our NATO partners. While in the German Federal Republic, West Germany, Secretary McNamara conducted negotiations which reassured the Germans of our determination to stand with them as partners. They, in turn, agreed to offset our military expenditures in their country with purchases in the United States, a two-way partnership. During the last year, our armed forces carried out missions of mercy as well as missions of defense. In Africa, with newly born nations stricken every year by natural disasters, the arrival of Americans by military air signaled welcome help in the fight for survival. In stark black and white, the Yugoslav earthquake etched pictures of devastation and human misery which transcended the political division between the free world and the communists. American equipment was brought in to clear the debris. A U.S. Army field hospital was set up to minister to the victims, young and old. 1963 saw intercontinental civic action in which our armed forces played an important role from Asia to South America. A year of the Alliance for Progress in several Latin American nations showed the other side of a coin inscribed too often with internal unrest and revolt spurred by Castro-type communists. Teaching self-help attracts eager pupils, with the U.S. Army providing equipment and know-how. This effort is a partnership between us and our friends south of the border, the republics that comprise the Organization of American States. In the words of Secretary McNamara, the American people should be willing to carry the financial burden, strengthening the foundations of the collective security of the Western Hemisphere. Although the Pentagon is keenly aware that there can be no cut price tag on our own security, every effort is being made to reduce rising costs. These are the keystones of our defense effort. American industry and labor, partners in supplying the needs of the armed forces, are cooperating in the effort to lower costs. Cooperation in cost reduction is paying off, and savings in the last year are expected to total more than $1 billion. In January 1964, Secretary McNamara reported on closing of unneeded bases, another requirement if defense costs are to be reduced.
To date, we have acted to either eliminate or substantially reduce activities at about 478 bases in this country and abroad. As a result, some 70,000 jobs have been eliminated, and the total savings will be in excess of $480 million per year, each year, every year, upon completion of these actions. About 650,000 acres of land, in addition, will be made available for private use. Now that leaves us with some 6,700 bases, roughly 4,000 plus in this country, 2,000 abroad. Every one of these bases is in jeopardy in the sense that we don't plan to retain a single one for which there is not a clear military purpose.
Despite such progress, defense still requires more than half of every budget dollar, a price for liberty which must be paid. Every man, woman, and child, all Americans, are vitally affected by our defense and survival as a free nation. Supporting national security is the responsibility of everyone who pays taxes, of everyone who buys savings bonds, of the girls and boys who are the citizens of tomorrow. The costly sacrifices of yesterday are not forgotten, nor are the hardships and sacrifices of today. President Kennedy, our late Commander-in-Chief, before his death signed a pay raise for all who serve in our armed forces. Shortly after, the tragedy of 1963 stunned America and the world. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, died while serving his country, cut down by an assassin. The armed forces escorted their late Commander-in-Chief to his final resting place at Arlington National Cemetery. Near the Pentagon, to a hill in Arlington, the cortege wound its way to pay final military honors. As 1964 dawned, a new Commander-in-Chief addressed the nation at the Capitol. In his first State of the Union message, President Lyndon B. Johnson spelled out America's defense policy, linking the progress of the past with the promise of the future.
Of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, members of the House and Senate, my fellow Americans. First, we must maintain, and our reduced defense budget will maintain, that margin of military safety and superiority obtained through 3 years of steadily increasing both the quality and the quantity of our strategic, our conventional, and our anti-guerrilla forces. In 1964, we will be better prepared than ever before to defend the cause of freedom, whether it's threatened by outright aggression or by the infiltration practiced by those in Hanoi and Havana who ship arms and men across international borders to foment insurrection. We must strengthen our Atlantic and Pacific partnership, maintain our alliances, and make the United Nations a more effective instrument for national independence and international order. We must become better neighbors with the free states of the Americas, working with the councils of the OAS, with a stronger alliance for progress, and with all the men and women of this hemisphere who really believe in liberty and justice for all. In short, I would say to the Congress that we must be constantly prepared for the worst and constantly acting for the best. We must be strong enough to win any war, and we must be wise enough to prevent one. We shall neither act as aggressors nor tolerate acts of aggression. We intend to bury no one, and we do not intend to be buried.